My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content.
You know, you've probably heard a lot of talk these days about affordable housing, the affordable housing crisis, well, like a housing crisis in general. It is a huge problem. And today's guest, Sean Carpenter, is part of the solution. So Sean and his company, Shamrock Development, that's what they focus on, is affordable housing. So Sean is usually from Boston, but today he's zooming in from Syracuse because he's going around the country talking to people about affordable housing. So Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Dave. Great to be here. And thanks for doing what you do.
My pleasure. So Sean, give us a little snapshot of you and Shamrock Development. And well, first of all, that's a good name. And coming from Boston, I can kind of see the tie-in there.
And the lack of sunscreen.
Man. Tell us a little bit about what you guys do, what you focus on with Shamrock Development.
Yeah, so it's an interesting dynamic of part development. I've been in the development business for 28 years, but also helping other developers get their developments off the ground. Right now, affordable housing is, 28 years ago when I first started in this business, affordable housing was boring. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. It was just not a thing. And now, every congressional district in the United States, the number one issue is affordable housing. One of the largest issues in Canada is affordable housing. Largest issues in Europe, in the European Union, housing, low cost housing, affordable housing. The Canada itself just put together a fund to develop thousands of units across the country. In the United States, the big beautiful bill, as they call it, the reconciliation bill that was passed back in July, opened up a huge amount of capital for investors to develop low cost housing or unrestricted housing, and to allow subsidies to do it. So what we're doing is, going out around the country. I've worked with a number of big firms. I've worked with a number of small firms, helping folks understand what their options are, understanding their financing options, playing in the capital markets, and then having the right team and the resumes next to them to build what they want to build for their communities.
So are you primarily working with developers to help them with all of this, or are you guys also doing your own developments?
Yeah, we have our own developments, and those are coming off the ground, and we also are helping quite a few folks right now do their own developments. Okay. And sometimes those two things are actually the same. So sometimes we're helping folks get their developments off the ground, but actually developing with them.
Oh, so like joint venture kind of thing.
Joint ventures and bringing in other partners. If it's a larger deal, we'll bring in other partners and do what we got to do.
Explain this to me, if you would, Sean. So we hear a lot about affordable housing. We hear about workforce housing. Maybe paint a picture of what kind of developments are you guys typically building, and who is the end user of these of the product? And is it build to sell, build to rent? How does it typically look?
So primarily the work that I'm doing is rent, is all rental, multifamily, high density multifamily housing. I've done condo developments, for sale developments. I've also done some other non-housing that, like, for instance, hospitality, that actually will ease some of the housing burdens in a particular area if we can have more short-term housing like hospitality and things like that. But primarily our business line is multifamily affordable housing, or some folks like to call it workforce housing. Now, depending on where you are and depending on what area you're in the country, workforce housing and affordable housing, capital A affordable housing, that's pretty much the same. In some areas of the country, workforce housing is actually that middle income housing for folks who don't necessarily qualify for subsidies, but still need some rent restrictions. And developers need subsidies to keep those rents low. So, it all comes down to cost of capital. So whatever that may be. In other areas, in the highest areas of the country, what you'll see is workforce housing that goes up to, say, 120% of the area median income. So your lowest of low incomes are at, poverty level 30% of the area median income, 50%. A lot of folks in the United States will call that Section 8 housing or vouchers.
Mm-hmm.
And then 60% is the low income housing tax credit primarily, and 50 and 60% of the LIHTC units. And then above that is attainable and then workforce housing. So say the area median income is $100,000, for a family of four, 50% is those who are making $50,000 around or
Yeah.
and
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So Sean, from a developer's point of view, obviously people enjoy doing good and giving back to the community, but how is the money made in affordable housing these days, especially with the cost of labor being through the roof, cost of construction being through the roof? That's what I hear. And that's kind of the general assumption is it's just too damn expensive to build these things to be able to rent them under market rent. So how does it work, and how does it make sense financially for developers?
It's a great question. And I'll tell you what, right now, market rate housing is too expensive. Doesn't pencil out for the most part. Interest rates are too high. Material costs are too high. So the only area to build is in these affordable housing because of the key component, which is we still have to pay the market rate interest rates. We still have to pay the same material costs for construction. However, the local, regional, state, or federal governments participate by providing developer subsidy in the form of maybe some low interest loans, maybe some low or no interest loans, maybe some low cost capital or tax credits, which can then be sold and syndicated. That equity will be used to develop that housing. So capital stack is a little bit. If your listeners out there are excited about capital stacks where market rate might be just debt and equity, very simple. No matter whether you're doing single family or multifamily, you get debt and equity. Well, we have debt and equity too, but the equity comes in a lot of different tranches. It might be private equity, it might be tax credit equity, it might be soft subsidies from the government, things like that.
Interesting. All right. So maybe to make this clear, can you walk us through a recent project that you guys have either completed or have in development right now, and just kind of paint the picture of how that's going to work?
Yeah, sure. I won't be regionally specific just to protect the innocent. And but let's just say it's in an area in the Northeast, 200 unit development, about $100 million to develop that property. Whether it's market rate or affordable, that's what it was going to cost. We're taking down an old hotel and putting up a new 200 unit, 189 units or so development. That required about $48 million in debt. So 40% of your stack is hard debt. And then that will convert down a little bit to when it's a permanent loan. About 40% of that is from the low income housing tax credit sales. So another $40 million from low income housing tax credits that were sold to a large national bank for under $1. So they were worth $1 each, but they were sold for under that. So that money was then placed into the deal. And then the balance at $20 million is from state and local subsidies that were provided, whether it was affordable housing trust funds or local economic development funds, federal home investment partnership program, and maybe some CDBG in there, community development block grant.
Okay, and then
that project will take about 2 years to build, and then it will be rented up to folks at 50 and 60% of the area median income families.
Okay, very good. And then once it's rented up and everything's going, what is the exit strategy for these projects typically?
So this is a low income housing tax credit example. So that's a 15-year hold. Now, of that, there's a sizable amount of that $100 million. Roughly 10% of that will be the developer will receive when I refer to the developer in the third person, the developer is always a separate entity than the owner. The developer will receive what's called a developer fee in this business. And that developer fee is generally around 10 to 12%. About 50% of that is plowed back into the deal. 50% is cash that comes back. So let's just say $5 million is in cash. That's the upfront between the closing, construction loan closing, and the conversion, which is the time at which we rent up all the units and we convert to a permanent loan from a construction loan. There's about $5 million that the developer will receive as payment for their services. At the end of the 15 years, that project can be sold. It can't be made market rate, but it can be sold or refinanced or resyndicated. Maybe it needs a little bit more work and whatnot. And then, there's some equity because those credits now have burned off. There's got to be some natural intrinsic equity that exists in that capital in the balance sheet of that deal that will then be brought back. And sometimes that gets split between the tax credit investor and the owner. Sometimes the state participates in that, and every deal is a little bit different. And that's where it does get complicated, and that's where folks need to have they'll need a team that knows exactly how that works. Because if you're banking on an exit strategy in 24 to 48 months, this is probably not going to be a program that you're going to work in. But if you're willing to take a 24 to 48 month payment and then go out 15 years on ownership, you'll see that there is some lucrative benefits there.
Hey there, if you're a capital raiser, a syndicator, or a fund manager, and you're looking for a steady flow of incoming accredited investor leads, then go ahead, grab a free copy of my new book, How to Get 20 Accredited Investor Meetings Every Month Without Cold Calling, Networking, or Chasing People. You can get that at 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com. Again, that's the number 20accreditedinvestorsbook.com.
Yeah. So is it typically the developer who is the owner as well? Because you're saying you have them separated, but is it typically the same controlling interest?
Yeah, there's a lot of it's not a formula that exists. So sometimes the owner is a group of folks, and then the developer might be different. It comes down to a big component. Every construction loan requires a guarantee. So the owner and or the developer, or either or both, is going to have to provide a guarantee equal to the amount of the construction loan. In this case, it was $60 million. Mm-hmm. So a $60 million construction loan has to be guaranteed by somebody with a balance sheet of $60 million. So that's where the splits of developer and ownership get really funky.
I would imagine. Yeah.
So, and these are large deals. I mean, you don't have to do 200 units. There are folks who are doing these at 15 units, and they're doing just fine. They might not be doing low-income housing tax credits, but they're doing some soft subsidies or whatnot. I know folks who are doing 4 or 5 townhouses, and they're working with their local economic development council to do that. So there's opportunities nationwide, and states all over the country. I think I mentioned I only mentioned Canada because it was kind of big in the news that the government had put together this fund to do just that. But in the United States, a lot of the states have their own programs that they've put in, and they issue bonds, and the proceeds of those bonds are actually put into affordable housing trusts or economic development plays and things like that. There's a natural value to having housing built in areas, regardless of whether it's rent restriction or not, because it spurs other development. And one thing I want to go back to, Dave, you asked me, who's the end user of these? And I think that's an important question, because this is where there's a lot of misnomer out there. When I stand in front of a zoning board, or I stand in front of a planning board, or a town council or city council, common council, you name it, I'll hear every generalization of poor people or low income individuals or low income families or people who don't want to work. I would say a vast majority of the housing that is built with low income restrictions, affordability restrictions, are for people who are actually working, for people who are making, maybe they're service workers, hotel workers, restaurant, hospitality workers, teachers, police officers, firefighters. I stood in front of one group in the Boston area recently, and I put up a chart of, this is what an accountant makes coming out of college. They qualify. This is what, somebody who's from a design school, they make coming out of college. They qualify. Mm-hmm. A lot of resort communities can't staff these ski resorts in the Northeast and out in the western part of the country. They can't staff their operation.
And house their staff. There's no housing.
Because they can't afford the housing. Yeah. So again, like, it does spur economic development. It's a very successful program. In the United States, the low-income housing texture has been around since 1986. And it's a very effective program. Millions and millions of units have been developed as a result of it.
So, Sean, for you, for these kind of deals, is there any aspect of private capital that's involved with these kind of projects, or typically not so much?
Yeah, and that's only been a recent thing. And there's a lot of, what you'll see now is there's a lot of big private equity folks that are jumping into these deals because they've started to see the real value. I think I started off by saying, like, 25 years ago, 26 years ago, nobody wanted anything to do with this. This is too complicated. But then folks are, smart folks who are looking at the mathematical equations of these real estate transactions is saying, I might only get a 4 or 5 or 6% return, but it's a certain return. It's a safe investment, and we can claim that we're doing, really good stuff. Mm-hmm. I think where the real rub is right now is the upfront cost of capital. That's not subsidized. You're not subsidized until you can close. In many cases, that means you have to have your zoning and your, all of your plans in place and things like that. So many of these deals have to seek out private capital up front. Mm. And that's why I said it gets convoluted with the developer and the ownership, because investors might want to take a piece of the developer as an exit strategy, or, like, say I said, Dave, I need $1 million. You give me $1 million. I'm going to go do all the design and engineering and the zoning and everything, get this deal closed. I'll give you the $1 million back at closing. That's a pretty much a guarantee. Mm-hmm. And you're going to say, well, that's all nice, Sean, but I need a little bit more than that. All right, I'll give you 50% of the developer fee. So now your $1 million might be $3 million.
Okay, I see what you mean.
So
Sean, you're traveling around the country a lot. Who are you typically talking to? What are you talking about when you say you're educating people about affordable housing? Is it who's your audience?
I used to go around the country just doing small groups and educating folks, and
what kind of folks? Developers,
like just newbies, anybody who was maybe going into a local RIA group or something like that, or to some of these these seminars and things like that. Now I'm going to more like trade association conferences and talking to practitioners. But where I'm making headway, and this is a dirty little secret that I probably shouldn't share, but this will be a good nugget for folks who've lasted this long with us so far. Right now, market rate developers who have spent a good amount of money getting their deals teed up and can't afford or can't get the financing to build that, whether it's construction financing or whatnot. Now, granted, interest rates are coming down, maybe. I don't know. They turned the rates down yesterday, and then the 10-year treasury's up. So I don't really, there's no correlation. Maybe the banks are greedy, maybe not. I don't know. But something's happening behind the scenes that's not normal. But the reality is that there's developers out there who just can't get that capital going. There's other areas that I'll give California as an example. There's a huge incentive for those market rate developers to go affordable. Mm-hmm. So that 100 unit development could be 125 units automatically just for saying, okay, I'm going to rent restrict on these units. And so there's a little bit of boost there. There's, we call that density bonus in some parts of the country. So I'm really just talking to anybody, quite frankly, anybody will listen. And, but I'm sitting in Chamber of Commerce meetings. I'm talking to economic development councils. I'm meeting with city councilors, and, it's been, I learn as much as I teach.
Yeah, no, that's fascinating. Sean, if people would like to find out more, if they'd like to connect with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Best way is our newly updated website, www.shamrockdevelopment.net. That's .net, not .com. So shamrockdevelopment.net. And there's a contact me section on there. We're not some big corporation. It's just a family-run shop. So you're going to get me, and I pick up my own phone and answer all my calls. And folks can learn a lot, or maybe get bored to death with my silly stories.
If it's the right fit, they'll be very, very thrilled. All right, Sean. Yeah. Well, thanks very much for being on the show. This has been enlightening.
Thanks.
All right, everybody, take care, and we will see you on the next one.
Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewsyou.com.